Hello, my name is Ollie Hemstock and I'm a Senior Research Fellow at the School of Design at Northumbria University. I'm pleased to present our paper, 3 Degrees of Influence in Virtual Workshops, towards an understanding of co-creative facilitation practice in technologically mediated settings. I'm a member of the Creative Fuse team here at Northumbria. Creative Fuse is a research project that's interested in the potential of the creative, cultural, digital and IT sectors to drive innovation and to really catalyse growth in the northeast region of England. The project started with phase 1 in 2016, which ran through to 2019, and we're currently in phase 2, beginning in 2020 and running through to the end of 2022. As part of the work we do here at Northumbria, we deliver various forms of responsible design innovation support to SME scale enterprises, and these can be both commercial and social in nature. So with this delivery, of course, during 2020-21, there was significant disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, which led to much of our delivery being shifted online. So we used digital technology and digitally enabled remote working to deliver our programs of support. And the benefits and limitations to the use of digital technology in order to do this, to provide participatory and co-creative design activities, but we feel it's likely to be here to stay. But more importantly, this is set amongst the developing discipline of design facilitation, which is designers working beyond the traditional disciplinary boundaries of design. And this is understood as an emerging practice, and it's currently a little indistinct and still developing, still growing. So this inquiry is focusing on the influencing factors and dynamics of delivering virtual co-creative and participatory workshops, sitting between design facilitation as a practice and digitally enabled remote working. So the research is designed around pursuing the question of what new understandings about participatory co-creative design practice are revealed through the design facilitators' experience of delivering these virtual workshops. And we identify several phenomena that are experienced by design facilitators and see these as being dynamic elements that exist within these virtual co-creative activities. So our aim is to move towards a deeper understanding of how these activities form objects of reflection, which can be used for consideration by practitioners as a means of expanding and developing future practice. But I think it's also important to mention at this point that it's not intended to be a direct comparison of virtual and in-person workshops. So this study is focusing on one of our design innovation support programs called Get Ready to Innovate. Get Ready to Innovate represents workshops as a means, which is a way of saying it's a focused collaboration by a beneficiary organisation and the design facilitators, aiming to attend to specific objectives, which in this case is determining the beneficiary's readiness to innovate, their readiness to pursue and act upon innovation opportunities. And this is a guided, reflective approach. The objective or the aim here is to help these beneficiaries create a roadmap towards actionable strategy. And it's a 12-hour program, and it's divided into 4 separate 3-hour sessions, moving from a kind of a getting to know you phase called triage, where we tend to work closely with the organisation to understand where they've come from, their past, their product service offers, their operations, but also focusing on their values, their passions, their motivations for the future, and ideas and visions. So we want it to be led by their ambition and aspiration. And then we move into a more ideating role where we work closely with these with these beneficiaries to identify new opportunities and explore and clarify their ideas. This moves into the 3rd session, which is about taking those opportunities and adding the detail, really. The 4th session is more analytical, a little more evaluative, and offers an opportunity to reflect upon the previous sessions, to fill in the gaps, and also to look at where further support might be offered. So in the context of virtual co-creative virtual workshops, these sort of virtual participatory activities. This paper's positioned within the kind of designing, implementing, conducting and evaluating of participatory workshops, which are delivered online and using online video conferencing platforms and digital collaboration tools. Much of the existing literature really focuses on practicalities, so there's a strong focus on implementation, performance and evaluation of the tools and technology itself, but also the way that workshops, co-creative participatory activities can be structured, scheduled, managed and scripted to work alongside the technology. This is useful and practical, so it's a kind of a prevailing focus on the identification of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and limitations of the methods and tools, the kind of stuff used to conduct virtual workshops. However, we feel it slightly overlooks the fact that virtual workshops, much like their in-person counterparts, are inherently complex. They're social environments and they involve kind of complex relational phenomena, which can have simultaneously positive and negative implications on how those workshops run. So we'd like to move towards a deeper understanding of practice in virtual workshops. So it's necessary to take a practice-oriented stance and recognise that performative, unfolding nature of practice and practicing within these co-creative activities. Our methodology is structured around a case study, and we focus on the Get Ready to Innovate programme, delivered both as part of Creative Fuse Northeast 2, but also the EGK Starters programme delivered in the US. Our units of analysis are the workshop deliveries themselves, of which there are 13 separate deliveries, over 52 sessions during 156 hours. Our units of data collection are our design facilitation team, and the data was collected using semi-structured, co-reflective group interviews. We ran 2 interviews, 1.5 hours each. The data from this was then inductively analysed using thematic analysis, and we followed evaluation criteria relating to the facilitator's experience of delivering Get Ready to Innovate in this virtual setting. So data was collected both in a kind of supplementary data, if you like, was collected in a longitudinal way throughout the delivery phase, if you like, throughout the delivery schedule. So here we were able to collect annotations of the workshop discourse through our digital whiteboards, which contributed to by the beneficiary organisations, the clients, if you like, as well as the design facilitators. We were also able to collect semi-structured sign-off interviews from the beneficiaries, again annotated on the digital whiteboards, but also captured as audio and text transcripts. But importantly, throughout the delivery phase, the design facilitators were also reflecting on their practice, both individually and together. So we've captured these reflections in an ongoing manner, which are also on these digital whiteboards. Finally, the primary data that was collected specifically for this study, again, as mentioned in the previous slide, are these semi-structured interviews involving the design facilitators, and these are annotated again on the digital whiteboards, but also captured using fairly conventional audio and text transcription. And what do these workshops look like? Well, I'm sure this is a rather familiar platform or rather familiar way of executing these activities. We used Microsoft Teams as our video conferencing platform, and the virtual collaboration took place using digital whiteboards, at this time using Miro. So the results of the analysis identify themes, and these themes describe qualitative elements which are experienced by design facilitators, and these are perhaps present in both virtual and in-person settings, but really we're interested in locating these elements within the virtual setting, and our data set relates to how facilitators perceive the effect of these elements on the dynamics of this virtual setting. And inherent in all of these elements is this rhetorical duality, so this idea that elements might simultaneously help and hinder the virtual workshop delivery. They're neither positive nor negative. They can be either of those at different times for different people, for different reasons. And it's also important to note that these elements are not presented as being discrete or separate, but rather they're interrelated, codependent, and kind of woven into this virtual setting. So the elements identified through our thematic analysis are structure, ambiguity, preparedness, confidence, intensity, trust and rapport, roles and dynamics, and technology. And these are described in detail in the paper itself. However, it's all well and good, I think, identifying these elements, but our aim really is to explore how these might be implemented, how might these elements then go on to inform practice. So a little further synthesis was used, mainly focusing on the reflection and reflective practice of the design facilitation team themselves, to understand better what the implications are of these elements on practice. So first, just a little focus on this idea of duality, this sort of rhetorical duality. So if we were to take ambiguity as an element, ambiguity can have a positive contribution to workshops. This ambiguous space can enable creative exploration. It can give facilitators, if you like, design facilitators, confidence by enabling that creative exploration, making space for ideation and reframing. So it can contribute to the confidence element. However, ambiguity can also be recognised as presenting a risk of discomfort for beneficiaries or participants. And we can often see this as practitioners, as participants can be keen to move through the problem exploration phase to focus on solutions in participatory practice, and I think this is an example of the discomfort that ambiguity can present. However, if we focus on the preparedness element, the preparedness of participants or beneficiaries to remain in a state of ambiguity then kind of has that link back in this duality. So if we were to then visualize what these elements might look like and how their influence on the virtual workshop setting might be represented, on the left you can see perhaps a useful way of visualizing each of these elements as a networked collection of influences surrounding the virtual setting, and I think this is useful in presenting a representation of the codependence, if you like, the interrelated nature. However, it doesn't feel entirely accurate or representative of the experience, whereas we consider the visualization on the right, which shows the workshop setting as larger and encompassing elements that are both known and unknown. So there are those elements that can be predicted and those that are unpredictable and that are emergent during practice in these workshop settings. So we considered how these elements might form, how there might be, the influence of these elements might form 3 degrees of influence within virtual workshops. So we'd like to present this as a speculative propositional model for kind of further consideration by practitioners. And this moves from the stage where there is the most degree of influence. This is where design facilitators have they can manipulate and predict to the highest degree. And then the second degree, if you like, of influence, which is the setting, which is kind of this more dynamic context. And then moving into the environment which surrounds the stage and setting as a kind of amorphous space of contingent phenomena, which are where there's the least degree of influence and the most unpredictability. So the stage, these are aspects of the situation that practitioners are most able to control directly. They're most deliberately able to influence. So these can be elements that are the most predictable, if you like. And a stronger comprehension of such elements ensures that they can be deliberately attended to, so they can be prepared for in the way that methods, tools and techniques and routines are developed and designed for the workshop. Then the setting is where the elements that exist are configured according to the peculiarities of the digitally mediated space. So this is where the digital technology used to run the workshops shapes the practice within this context. And here a focused reflection on action can perhaps draw out those elements that are perceived. better understand their relational intertwinings and also how they're influenced by the stage, so that we can more adroitly, or if you like, more effectively attend to them in practice. However, the environment, this is the most kind of complex and unpredictable. So it's the overall situation for participatory and co-creative design practice. It's complex and it's emergent. And this is where elements that are the most unpredictable, these kind of contingent phenomena that emerge through this performative flow that involves all actors, and those are both human and non-human actors. And these are things that then have to be dynamically negotiated in the moment during practice by practitioners. So a few points of discussion. There's an apparent similarity here between the concepts of front stage and backstage in participatory design infrastructuring and our use of stage, if you like, as a degree of influence on virtual workshops. However, we've chosen the term really to be more general and encompass that which can be prepared for, which can be predicted for. I think it's also it's also significant how technology is is highly influential. The technology creates this socio-material setting for virtual collaboration. So it's in a space that is emergent. It's influenced by all the peculiarities of the situation, the actors, and the unpredictable and the predictable elements. But these are all configured by the affordances of digital technology. So the space for practice, if you like, the setting as a ground for practice, as this set of contingent embodied routines, to quote Kimball. It's where practitioners, this is where practitioners engage with this kind of dialogue of Sean's materials of the situation, but it's very much configured, shaped by the digital technology itself. So that's a very influential element. And again, to reiterate, the environment is where there's the least degree of influence, the least degree of control, but also the most unpredictability. So its effects are felt in how facilitators may be confronted by new or unexpected phenomena in this continuously emerging, converging, performative flow. But this really offers a rich ground for articulating the tacit and embodied knowledge involved in delivering co-creative participatory activities in the virtual setting, so doing this virtually through digitally enabled remote working. And it's perhaps valuable to use reflection on action to make these tacit and embodied forms of knowledge more discursive for further development. And to close with some concluding remarks, this study involves design facilitation experts reflecting on their experiences of designing, implementing, and delivering co-creative workshops in virtual settings. So design facilitators have identified several influential elements interpreted as dynamic and interrelated influences, and these are codependent and woven into the virtual settings. And in this paper, these elements are positioned as objects for critical reflection, and we give a propositional speculative model of three expanding degrees of influence through stage, setting, and environment. And this feels particularly relevant in respect of the prevalence and development of new and more powerful digital collaboration tools and technologies, and how rapidly these are becoming available. So therefore, focusing on perhaps articulating tacit knowledge is essential to developing participatory and co-creative practice, as we see these activities continuing to be enacted virtually, but also being integrated into more hybrid modes of delivery. And finally, a few questions. It's interesting to consider how the balance of duality in each of these elements can be tipped in favour of positivity or positive influence to ensure success of workshops. And this has been explored further by our team in a recent paper due to be published in 2022. It's useful then to consider how practitioners can detect, monitor, and attend to these dynamics, so the way that these dynamics affect virtual workshops. And finally, it's interesting to consider to what extent embodied knowledge might be disembodied or embodied differently within the virtual workshop setting. Thank you very much.